Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
What is up, Touch MBA family? Welcome back to the show. This is your host, Darren, coming at you in 2016. I can't believe the show has been going on now for 3 years and that we have thousands of listeners from over 60 countries now. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. And this year, I hope to continue to bring you guys great content that will help you find and get into your dream MBA programs. Some of you may have noticed that I haven't put up a podcast in a couple months, and believe me, it feels like a long time for me as well. But I took that time off to work on some projects that I believe will help you figure out which schools fit you best. For example, this week we talk about school selection. I've created a tool which helps you identify what are your most important criteria? What are your must-haves in an MBA program? And then ranks the top 100 MBA programs accordingly. So it's a completely unbiased way for you to get some school direction based on your preferences, which are truly unique for everyone. One applicant might only care about rankings, while another applicant cares more about ROI and location of the MBA program, maybe how the faculty is ranked or how strong the alumni are. So go check out this tool at touchmba.com. We give free school selection help there. Take advantage of that. You just need to submit your profile and we'll give you feedback on what you can do to improve, how AdComs will view your profile, which schools might make better sense for you. You can also share your profile with over 10 top business schools. We're talking about sharing your profile with admissions committees before you apply to get some feedback. So that's all free at touchmba.com. And I have to say I'm really proud of you. And by you, I mean our listeners. I spent 2 or 3 days tracking down, the hundreds of applicants who have come to our site for school selection help just to see where they ended up. And although I wasn't able to get everyone, really proud to say that we've helped listeners like yourself get into the top 10 U.S. business schools, all of the top 10 European business schools, all of the top 5 Asian business schools. So you're in really good company. I also say this because we've been able to see over the years which students are getting into what schools. So I think this really helps us evaluate your candidacy for your target schools, and it's free at touchmba.com. So hope to see you there. So what I thought we'd do to start off 2016 is have an episode focused on how to make better MBA school selection choices. I started this site and I started the podcast to help applicants like you figure out which schools fit them best, because I know how crazy intimidating this process is. There's so many schools to choose from. How can you determine which one will be the best investment for you, will be the best life experience for you? So I hope that this episode will help you make better decisions in terms of which schools to focus on. What I'm going to do is use the framework proposed by Chip and Dan Heath in their book Decisive: How to Make Better Choices in Life and Work. And I'm going to apply this framework to MBA applicants and cover, examples that I've seen work and not work. First, there was a McKinsey study, and this McKinsey study covered 1,000 businesses, tracked 1,000 businesses over 5 years, and what they found was that the decision-making process mattered more than the decision-making analysis by a factor of 6 in subsequent outcomes in terms of revenues, profits, and market share. And I think this is a lesson not only in business but also personally as well, is that we need to have a really strong decision-making process to make the best decisions. And there's 4 common problems we often run into when making decisions, and those are: 1, you encounter a choice, but narrow framing or unduly limiting your options makes you miss possible options. A second common problem is that confirmation bias, leads you to gather self-serving info. A third problem is that you make a choice, but short-term emotion tempts you to make the wrong choice. And a fourth common problem is that we're often overconfident about how the future will unfold. So the authors have come up with a WRAP acronym to describe the process they encourage all people to follow when making decisions. And I think a lot of these tips can really help you, MBA applicants. So let's start with the first letter of the acronym WRAP, which is W, and that is to widen your options. And the idea here is to combat the common error we make of narrow framing. So there's a couple techniques you can use here. The first is the vanishing options test. So let's say you're super obsessed with, say, Harvard and Stanford. What if those schools didn't exist? Where else would you look at? So this is a way to get you to look beyond, the current options right in front of you. Another framework is to consider the opportunity cost. And I think many MBA applicants do this, but I think it's important to consider the opportunity cost in terms of maybe there's a better option than an MBA in general. I don't think that an MBA is the best investment for everyone. And yes, I'm saying that on the Touch MBA podcast. I think for many people, an MBA is the quickest way they can reach their goals. But for many others, maybe it's another degree or another job opportunity that can set them up to do the work they love or that they're really excited about. So always consider the opportunity cost of the choices that are right in front of you. I also think it's important to talk to people who have already solved the problem to widen your options. This is talking to family and friends that have been through your target MBA programs or students or alumni. What do they see as the best parts of the program? Do they think that the program could help someone like you? And I also think, to widen your options, it's good to talk to someone that's seen lots of MBA applicants. Like, for example, us at Touch MBA, we've seen hundreds of applicants, apply to different schools and seeing which schools they're able to get in. So we have a good idea of what options are in range and what options could be beneficial for you. So it's a way to widen your options, right? Is to talk to someone like us at Touch MBA or another consultant or friends, family, etc. Another way to widen your options is to have a decision playlist, what the authors call a decision playlist, which is really just a set of questions that will help you think more broadly about which options could fit you. And for those of you who haven't heard it, please listen to my podcast with James Clark, who graduated from LBS. And James wrote an outstanding blog post about questions he wished he had asked before he made an MBA decision. Some of those questions are, for example, I'm looking here at the post, is the school better at any particular subject area? How many core classes are required? Are there study groups? Do they matter? What are the campus facilities like? How are electives allocated? What clubs are on campus? Which ones are active? And what ways they're active? And anyways, there's more than 20 questions that he lists that will really help you expand your possibilities. So again, those are all ways you can expand your MBA universe, right? Don't get stuck on one or two schools. The second letter is R, which is to reality test your assumptions. And this is to combat confirmation bias, which is our tendency to search for information or to interpret information to confirm our own preconceptions. The first thing you can do here is to test your assumptions. So let's say you're really stuck on believing that Harvard is the only business school that's worth your time, right? That if you don't get into Harvard, then it's really not worth it. Well, why is that? What would have to be true for Harvard Business School to be the only option for you? And so this is a way of kind of teasing out your assumptions for your top MBA choices, right? And what you'll really get at is under those assumptions, you'll realize what's important to you. Is it prestige? Is it because you think that it will land you the best job opportunities? Is it because they have a really large alumni network? And once you tease out these assumptions, you'll start to realize what's important to you, and maybe you'll also realize that other schools can help you meet all those needs that you have. Okay, so another thing you can do is to ask disconfirming questions. So talk to students at your dream schools and ask them, well, which parts of the program are you not that happy with? In what ways can this program, in your opinion, be improved? So you're just getting a more balanced perspective, and this will help combat your confirmation bias. Another thing you can do is what the authors call ooching, which is to make small experiments to test your assumptions. In terms of MBA applicants, I really think here the best thing you can do is to visit campuses of your target schools, right? And not just the 1 or 2 schools you're obsessed with, but say your universe of 5 or 6 schools, because nothing can really beat being on the campus, seeing what the classes are like, meeting students, meeting professors, meeting the MBA staff, and just getting an overall feel of what the energy is like at these MBA programs. And if you only go to, say, 1 or 2 campuses, you'll never really know, right? You're not really testing your assumptions. Go to multiple campus information sessions or tours and get a feel. And maybe a school that you weren't considering as strongly will really pop out at you. So that's one way to ooch or to test your assumptions. Finally, one other tip here is to zoom out. What you're doing here is getting a reality test of whether you're competitive at those schools. Sometimes if you apply in a vacuum, you get so caught up in like 2 or 3 schools and you just have laser focus and it's those 2 or 3 schools or the end of the world. Well, why don't you talk to other admissions consultants or talk to us at Touch MBA, we've seen hundreds of people get into different schools, so we can point you in the right direction and say, okay, these 2 or 3 schools will probably be stretches for you, but these 2 or 3 schools will be targets. And maybe some of those schools that you thought were impossible to get into are actually targets, and some of the schools that you thought were easy to get into are stretches. It's just a way for you to reality test your assumptions. Definitely do not apply in a vacuum. Whatever you do, if it's with us or with someone else, definitely get an outside perspective on how others see your chances at certain universities. Okay, let's move to the third letter, which is A, which is to attain distance. And this is to combat overcoming the short-term emotions associated with decision making. There's 2 thought experiments you could do here. One is the 10-10-10 test, which is how would you feel about this decision 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now, and 10 years from now? And the second thought experiment is what would you tell your best friend to do? Oftentimes, it's much easier, we have a much more balanced and fair perspective when we're advising our friends on similar life problems that they might have, and I think the same would go for schools. Now let me give a personal example here. When I was applying to undergraduate universities, I think like most seniors, like most high school seniors, I was really just concerned with ranking. So I applied to many of the top-ranked universities. Fortunately, I was able to get into a top-ranked school. That school was Princeton. I had an amazing experience there, an unforgettable experience there. But 10 years later, looking back at that experience, yes, ranking was important, and I would still have encouraged my high school self to apply to a top-ranked school. But another factor that I think is so incredibly important is how strong the school's alumni base is. And I mean, if I think of what I've really gained the most from my Princeton experience, it's been after my university experience. And I've lived in 5 or 6 different countries, and each of these different countries I've been in, I've found this incredible Princeton alumni group that have helped open doors for me, have helped connect me to people, have become my best friends. And it's because alumni loved the school so much that they're just dying to be involved and dying to meet other Princetonians. And I think I would give that advice to more MBA applicants, is that instead of looking at just the straight rankings, whether that's US News or Financial Times, it's to look at alumni rankings. Which schools are consistently ranked by students and by alumni as having these awesome alumni networks. And some like a school that always pops up in these rankings, and you can find these rankings at Bloomberg Business Week or even Economist, is Dartmouth. Dartmouth Tuck School is always top 5 in terms of alumni effectiveness. And I would encourage more MBA applicants to look at that ranking. In other words, to take a long-term perspective about what's important to them, a 10-year perspective of what's important to them in their MBA education. So I think those two thought experiments are really useful to attain distance from your decision and to give you, some insights into what's going to be important to you 10 years down the road. Another way to attain distance is to really just focus on your core priorities or your must-haves. And here I'm going to repeat this because I think this is the single most important thing MBA applicants can do to make the best school selection decision, is to determine their 3 to 5 must-haves in an MBA program. What are those 3 to 5 must-haves? Is it a strong alumni network, like I just mentioned? Is it ROI? Is it location? Is it a 1-year program? Is it that it's really strong in finance or really strong in operations? You need to figure out those 3 to 5 must-haves in your MBA program, and that will really help your MBA search and kind of clear the clutter in your head. And you'll be less confused when you're bouncing around forums and MBA sites. When you know what you want, it becomes a lot clearer. And let me give a real-life example of this. Li Da-Ming, he was a Touch MBA listener who was also part of our Admissions Edge program. He's now enrolled at the Kellogg School. But his must-haves were, I want to work for McKinsey, Bain, or BCG in Asia after my MBA. That's it. So which school will help him get there? And with that criteria, he was able to draw up this universe of schools, such as Kellogg, such as INSEAD, such as SEABS, such as Duke. And he got into all those schools. Those schools are probably easier to get into than, say, Harvard or Stanford. And they would still get him to the same place. So I think it's really important for you to determine those 3 to 5 must-haves, and we've tried to help you do this. When you submit your profile at Touch MBA, we have you actually rank. We give you 20 criteria that you can pick from, and based on the criteria you pick and how important those criteria are to you, we return a matching school score. So this is a completely unbiased way for you to get some direction in terms of which schools match your criteria the best, because those criteria are different for everyone, right? But the whole idea here is to focus on your must-haves. So important. Okay, let's get to the last tip, which is P, which is preparing to be wrong. And I think the authors are really smart here in that we're often overconfident in our decisions, and we're overconfident in the future and how things will turn out. The future is not a point. The future is a range of both the very worst things that can happen and the very best things that can happen. So to kind of uncover your thinking process and your decision-making process and what's important to you, ask yourself 2 questions. The first is, it's 1 year or 2 years from now, and your MBA application process or your MBA's, the schools you've selected, it's been an incredible failure. Why? Conversely, ask the opposite question. It's been an absolute success. You're so happy with your MBA experience, like you're so pumped that you're coming out of this school. Why? And if you ask yourself those questions, you'll tease out what's really important to you. Did you have a bad experience 2 years down the road because you're at a school where there's not a lot of career opportunities in, say, the industry you wanted to get into? Or did you have a bad experience because you didn't really like your classmates? Or because the weather was really cold? Or did you have a bad application experience because you didn't prep your recommenders in time? Whatever it is, think of those negative cases. And then think of the most positive case. Why was this MBA experience magnificent for you? Is it because you met your wife, or is it because you made 5 new best friends from that business school, or is it because you landed your dream job after? Is it because you were able to live in 3 different countries during your MBA? I mean, these questions will help you think beyond the rankings and really help you identify what's important to you. All right, so to sum it up, use this RAP decision-making process when you are figuring out which MBA programs to target. Okay, W, widen your options to combat the narrow framing problem. R, reality test your assumptions to combat your confirmation bias. A, attain distance from your decision to overcome short-term emotions. And P, prepare to be wrong to overcome your overconfidence in yourself. The future is a range of possibilities, not just a single point. I hope you can hear how passionate I am about this subject. I think that school selection is so important. It's 50% of the game. So I hope this episode really helps you identify more than one or two schools that could be